Hello everybody, Jason here from the At the Coalface podcast. I've created a new sub-series called Mentoring Moments, and Mentoring Moments is composed of clips taken from my one-on-one and group mentorship sessions where we discuss e-commerce, digital, retail, and so much more. Hopefully you get a lot out of this. Enjoy. Hello everybody, I'm here again with Sean Mellis. And we're talking on our our 2-weekly one-to-one mentorship call. And he asked a very good question that I think is going to be applicable to quite a broad audience around, okay, I've gotten in with a business, with a certain individual in a business. Maybe I've even gotten to the point where I'm able to pitch to them, or I'm able to speak to them in more depth. I'm able to present to them about what we do, how we do it, the value we bring to the table. And I might even have been put in a situation where I'm now presenting to either a board alongside that person, or if it's a multi-brand client, I might be in a position where I'm now presenting to 2, 3, 4 brands at the same time that I'm presenting to my primary contact in that business. So how do we then leverage, or how do we then put ourselves in a position where we can present more broadly to the business? How can we position ourselves and our services to other brands under the main brand umbrella without being smarmy, or without doing anything dodgy, or without maybe doing some cold outreach via LinkedIn or something like that, or cold outreach via email even, of people that may have been in that presentation and attended that presentation, but you know that there are more opportunities in that overarching umbrella account than the one scenario or project or opportunity that you're discussing or presenting at that time. So what does that look like, and how do I approach that when I've been put in this situation before? Because it's happened to me many times before. And the way that I would usually approach this is I would go to my primary contact, who effectively is acting as my advocate within the business that I've got the closest and strongest relationship with. And I would ask them if they would be willing to make warm email intros to those other key leaders in the room, especially if they're leaders of other brands within the umbrella, and especially if those other brands expressed interest in the meeting about jumping on board with the same type of engagement, that the engagement that you're there to talk about. If they want to jump on board with that and they want to leverage and tee off of that engagement and maybe even benefit from that engagement, because oftentimes they'll be thinking in the back of their mind, if I sort of line up my engagement with this engagement, maybe I'll get a better deal, because it's all about scale, right? And so if you sell small to sell big is the way that we are taught to sell. You get a foot in the door, you get a wedge in the door, and then all of a sudden more opportunities can open up than we could have maybe ever imagined in the first discussion that we had with a client. So that would be always my advice. And you asked a further question, which I think was a smart question. You said, is it best if I supply some verbiage or some wording or maybe some info or collateral or attachments to my contact, so that then when they make the intro, they can have something to work from? And I suggested no. And the reason why I would normally suggest no in that first intro is because your person that is your contact is oftentimes going to know how to craft the intro to that receiving person in the best way possible. And you're going to get a learning experience by reading how they introduce you. You're going to start to understand how that person on the receiving end likes to be spoken to and presented to, or having an opportunity presented to them. And so it's an opportunity to gather intelligence in a completely unbiased way, that if you craft something in advance and give it to them to hand over, then you miss that learning opportunity. You miss that engagement opportunity. You miss that intelligence gathering opportunity. So that was my recommendation, is that you always want to get a warm internal recommendation wherever possible, particularly if you've got an existing relationship with an existing advocate within the business. They will advocate oftentimes behind the scenes in ways that you won't even see in the email. They might have a water cooler conversation with one of their workmates in ways that you might not ever know about. But if you go through those internal channels, it will oftentimes open up many more doors faster than any other cold approach. Even if those people have seen you present before, I still consider that a cold approach. If you email them directly, it's still a cold approach, because they don't have a direct relationship with you, or via someone else don't have a direct relationship with you. So does that make sense, Sean? And does that feel like the right approach in this situation?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. It's like you don't have any context of what this person is like, if they prefer detail or if they prefer straight to the point. If they speak a certain way, it's all about empathizing with that and crafting a message which is going to be received better. So if you're force feeding any info or language, it's probably best not to, because of those reasons. You just want to leave it up to the person who knows that person best.
Yeah, and look, that's not to say that person who makes the intro won't ask you for something in advance. They may say, hey, look, the person I'm going to introduce you to is detail orientated. They're going to want to have some more information about you. They're going to want to have some more background on you before I make this intro. Can you send me through maybe that same slide deck that we saw during that, say, board presentation or whatever it is? Can you send me through a copy of that presentation so that I can attach it to the intro email? Or if it was a recorded, let's say it was a Zoom presentation that you recorded, then obviously you're going to want to give that person the link if they ask for it so that they can then send it through in the intro. Oh, by the way, Bob, who I'm introducing you to, here's the link to that presentation we saw with Sean the other day, just to refresh your memory of what we discussed and what we covered. So I always leave it up to the person doing the introduction to ask for any of the collateral that they freeze the conversation.
Yeah, nice.
Cool. Anything else? I think you made a good point. You said it's almost like the difference between asking someone out on a date cold versus having a friend introduce you to a friend, right? It's the same kind of scenario. You tend to have a lot more success. If you just walk up to somebody in a club and ask them out, you tend to have a lot less success than if you have a friend introducing you to a friend and saying, hey, you got to meet Sean. He's a great guy. I think you should go out. He fancies you, whatever. I think you should go out on a date with him. You're going to have a lot more chance of getting a yes in that scenario than a cold approach. So it's very similar in business.
100%.
It's my way of thinking.
Yeah. Speaking from experience, Jason.
Funnily enough, my wife actually reached out to me cold via Instagram. So she slid into my DMs. So I am not a good example of how to do it.
We have that in common. My partner reached out to me cold via LinkedIn.
Wow. Okay, there we go. So the cold approach can work. It's just the rate of success tends to be pretty low.
Yeah, that's right.
Good stuff. What else is on your mind this week? Because we've had 2 weeks since our last session together, so I'm sure a lot has gone on. There's been a lot happening within the Bot Hello business.
Yeah, there is. I'm considering the next full-time hire. I'm unsure whether I need more support on account management, delivery, or sales. My gut instinct is the account management side and having someone run the projects, coordinate my global team who are mostly contractors to do the delivery, and they act as the point of contact for all the stakeholders and are able to jump on calls, gather requirements, do all the heavy lifting consulting work, and then the delivery gets managed internally. And then I just run most of the sales. But I do need someone for more creating proposals, drafting the follow-up emails, just sorting the admin for me around the sales meetings, because I'm just like this week I've probably had 6 or 7 sales meetings and not a time to draft any of the follow-up. I don't know if one person can do all that work or I need to hire someone part-time to be like a BDM assistant. Yeah, I'm just not sure where to hire next.
Yeah, look, I think there's 2 ways you can go on. Let's tackle the admin piece first, because I think that's the easier one. The other one I'll come back to. I think you've got 2 routes you can go with this. If you're thinking that you ultimately want to replace yourself with a salesperson or a BDM or a BDR or whatever you want to call them, if you're thinking that at some point you want to remove yourself from that operational element of the business, even slowly over time, then what it probably makes sense to do is to hire a junior BDM that can shadow you, that can follow you, that can start doing the grunt work. But at the same time, they're learning about how you engage with customers. They're shadowing you, they're watching you, they're learning from you, they're on the presentations, they're watching the videos, they're seeing how you craft the proposals, and then they're actually doing the work, right? So maybe they shadow you for 2 or 3 proposals, then you start letting them create the proposals with you signing off on them before they go to the client, and then ultimately they create the proposals that pretty much can go. You're confident that they can go directly to the client without your final stamp of approval, and then maybe the final step is they start taking over some of the less common client presentations where it's not this massive opportunity that you're putting at risk. Maybe the smaller deals, they can start taking over. They can do the presentations, they can do the closing, they can craft the presentation, they can also craft the proposal at the end of the presentation. That feels like a really smart path to go if you're looking to replace yourself in, say, the next 12 to 18 months. Getting someone on board now feels like the right thing to do. If not, if you're thinking, actually, we're still young enough and nimble enough and lean enough that actually I think I need to be the one closing these deals for the foreseeable future. I actually don't even know when I'm ready to step out of that primary agency lead, closing the deals, negotiating with the client's position. Then just get a VA. Just get a VA, because from the sounds of it, this is going to be very lumpy in terms of the admin help that you need. You might have a crunch right now where you need to get 7 proposals out, but next week there might be virtually no admin work that you need help with. And so taking on someone even part-time can be a real challenge, because you got to keep them fed to justify their existence in the business. Whereas if you take a VA on board on a contract basis, or on a piecemeal or a weekly or an hourly basis, then that allows them to flex up and down with your requirements, right? So I think there's 2 ways you can go depending on the direction you want to take the sales and revenue side of the business, and who wants to own that in the medium to long term. That makes sense?
Yep.
And then the other one, I think from an account management perspective, I think if we break this down, I think what you may need to consider is whether you need a project manager or an account manager or customer success. And the reason why I say that is because if your work is typically lumpy, meaning that it's typically project based, it's not, okay, we've got a retainer engagement for the next 24 months with this client where we're doing 40 hours a month with them. That's when you need an account manager or a customer success manager that manages the retainer engagement under a managed services model. If your projects are usually more discrete and monolithic in nature, and the engagements are more discrete and monolithic in nature, then what you really need is a project manager, because a project manager is usually better at business analysis and being able to capture project requirements. They're usually better at drafting a scope or a business requirements document or a statement of work as well that you can then put into the proposal. They're usually better at putting together and managing a timeline, a budget, and a scope, which is the 3. If we look at the trifecta of skills that the best project managers in the world have, it's managing budget, time, and scope, right? And keeping clients on track with all of that, and managing scope creep through change requests at the appropriate time, etc. And account managers typically are not as good, unless they come from a project management background. They are more about, okay, let's run the Jira board of tickets that we're delivering under a retainer. They're more of an order taker usually than a PM. A PM usually has to have some business analysis skills where they're actually developing the scope of work alongside you and the client. And that's where that PM firepower becomes really useful in the business if it's discrete pieces of work.
Yeah, it's a PM then.
Yep.
One thing I'm considering as well is whether or not I should set up an in-person office, like maybe a 4 to 8 person spot in a co-working space for those more monolithic projects with detailed scopes and whatnot. The remote setup for those without a whiteboard and sticky notes and stuff in a room, I think could be challenging. And I am considering moving to Melbourne to do that, just because of the nature of the clients and accounts down here. And most of my clients are actually from Melbourne. Do you have an opinion on what phase that makes sense to have an in-person? I know you've done fully remote, but maybe for my type of work, since it's a little lumpier, having a home base for the project management could be really valuable.
Yeah, the only downside of that is your requirement to hire from that area. And oftentimes that's just going to simply limit your hiring pool. And with modern technologies like Miro, which is just one example, where you've got the digital sticky notes, you've got a digital whiteboard that can be dragged and dropped around exactly like a physical whiteboard. Between something like a Miro and a Figma and all the other tools, digital tools that we have nowadays, I still don't think that it's strictly required that project management or creative teams meet in person. I think that the tooling is now better than it's ever been. And I just wouldn't want you to put yourself in the position of limiting your hiring pool just because you think you need to be there in person. Because I think that there's benefits. Do I think there's no benefit of being in person? No, I would never say that. But do I think that the benefits outweigh the benefits of being able to hire the best talent globally or even nationally across the whole of Australia, and being able to get those people at a reasonable cost? to your business? I can't answer that for you, but I would say take that into account, because I definitely think that some of the digital tooling available nowadays for project management really ease the pain of not being able to meet in person.
Yeah, 100%. Like this recent project I was speaking about earlier, it's all remote, all online, leveraging Upwork and other talent pools, finding specialists within 2 days' notice who are the best of what they do and can start straight away. You just can't do that with the in-person hiring process.
Yeah, and also remember that if you're hiring like on a permanent basis as opposed to a project basis, again, you have big pressure to keep them employed, keep them fed,
Yeah,
keep them to justify. Good PMs are making 200 grand a year in Australia now. That's the reality, and between 150 and 200 grand, somewhere around there. And
yeah,
that's a big resource to have to justify keeping fed versus a freelance PM, or even you can probably get for around the same price as a traditional project manager. You can even go one step higher and get a program manager level resource in the short term, help run these monolithic projects, especially if, and where a program manager with deep program management experience would be beneficial is if you are delivering in conjunction with other partners that have to deliver components of work and there's lots of dependencies. Having someone with program management experience actually adds significant firepower to their project management capabilities, because they know how to align those dependencies in their project plan to where the total program of work doesn't fall.
you explain program manager.
Yeah, so a program manager typically comes from a project management background, and then the next evolution of their career typically is a program manager, and they are generally managing, instead of managing an isolated project, they're managing a program of work where there may be multiple internal teams delivering on that program of work, and it's usually over a sustained period of time as opposed to necessarily just this discrete piece of work. There might be this overarching program of work, and they are typically very good, as I said, at managing multiple delivery partners as opposed to just your team internally. So they typically have a lot of experience in multi-vendor, multi-partner projects where all of those disparate pieces have to come together like a Rubik's Cube. That's typically where they excel, easing the communication and leading the communication across all of those partners, because oftentimes the lead agency on a project is expected to provide program management to the project. Even if the customer doesn't know what that is, they expect it. Just by definition, the lead agency on a project will be expected to do all the program management with let's say there's a system integrator involved. Let's say there's a third-party designer involved. Let's say there's a third-party analytics agency involved. Whatever that is, the lead agency doing the bulk of the work is always expected to align all of those other partners together for the deliveries. So having someone that has program management experience adds a tremendous amount of value to the services that you provide.
Yeah, I honestly hadn't heard of that term. It's not common in the consulting world. From where I was from, I think it gets to like a director sort of level, and they're probably, or a partner is the program manager. That's exactly what I just did for this last project, and I think that's a much better fit for the need that I have, because as I chatted to you through Slack the other week, I'm thinking of having these programs for the different software tools. So someone across all three and able to resource the different resources for those projects, and then have maybe individual project managers for each of them. That's exactly what I need. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad I was able to hopefully point you in the right direction on that one. Anything else going on in your world right now that you'd love to cover off today?
How do you find the time to produce so much content? Because I want to do it as well, but I just don't have the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's getting over the hurdle of, so I'm a perfectionist, and that was the thing that held me back the most for the longest of creating content, was my need for perfection. And in fact, if you go back to my first videos, and even when I started my podcast, which was originally a video vlog, I would spend hours and hours in post-production, and it slowed me down to the point where I just actually hated the thought of creating content, knowing how much post-production was required. And because I've now gone to a much more streamlined production process, and I'm not as anal about perfection, and I use, for example, for the major part of the editing of the podcast, I use automation through Desk. And so I've found tools that, sure, they're not as perfect as doing everything manually, and that it doesn't net a perfect result, but it's 90+% of the way there. And so for me, being able to put out content at scale became my priority, as opposed to trying to scale perfect content. So
Cool.
for me, that is the game changer. When I just decided volume is more important to me than perfection, and also just being able to get my story out there on a rolling basis and being able to produce daily in some fashion. Had to figure out, because I bought an M3 mirrorless camera and I bought thousands of dollars worth of gear, like the best gear I could afford basically at the time, and wireless mics and just everything. And I still use those in the right environment and in the right situation, but it's very rare, and probably more, it's more along the lines of I've now figured out a way to use easier to use off the shelf tooling and automation to make my process faster and easier for me, which puts the joy back into actually creating the content in the first place, because I'm not staring down the barrel of 20 hours worth of recorded content that I now have to post produce, and I hate the process because I am not a D-Rock, and because I'm not a D-Rock, I don't spend my life doing post-production creative. That's not me. I'm not a creative in that way. My value is in the content itself, not the production value of that content. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't aim for quantity and quality. It's just until you have someone that can help you with the quality piece and take that load off your back. I think almost everyone, because when you first start out making content, the quality's gonna be shit anyway, no matter how good the post-production is. You haven't learned how to articulate yourself well enough at the start to have that excellent post-production matter as much. And you're really just honing your craft and building an audience in the early days anyway. So just get it out there and get it out there at scale, and then look back on it, critique yourself. And it's like muscle in a gym. The more you exercise it, the better you get. So the more long form posts that you write, the better your writing ability becomes. The more videos you record, the better your video presentation skills will become. The more you do recording of podcasts, the better your interviewing skills become. I think all of this is just a factor of time, and it's very difficult to short circuit that process and trying to speed it up. It's a function of repetition and focusing on incremental improvement along the way. So I always encourage people at the beginning, focus on quantity, not quality. And the longer that you go on, the quality will just come naturally. Plus, then you can usually afford to hire some help with the post-production piece, which also ups the end production quality again. So when I think about what I do with you, I'm using Gmeet to record our conversation. I'll download that Gmeet file. I'll strip out the audio file. I'll pump it through Descript. I'll take out the ums and the ahs. I'll take out the long word gaps. Then I'll put that into Audacity. I'll put the opening and the closing in it and do some additional little tidy ups. But realistically, every single podcast episode now takes me on an average of 1 hour to post produce per episode. That's it. It used to take me 3 or 4 per episode. So it takes me maximum. I've got it down to, in some instances, it's under an hour to do post-production now. So for me to pump out an episode with 1 hour of post-production effort, that's totally doable for me. So it's really about scale. And then when we think about video, so I'm about ready to post a new video to LinkedIn that was shot 100% on my iPhone as I walked. I did all the post-production in TikTok. I download the post-produced video in TikTok with the music and everything. I'm now going to repurpose that to Instagram stories, Instagram reels. I'm going to upload it to YouTube shorts, and I'm going to use it on LinkedIn with a long form post to go with it. So I'm repurposing content and making it contextually relevant to the platform I'm uploading it to through the long form conversation that I put around it. And so that's another thing that works really well for me, is repurposing content, but giving unique context in the long form text portion of the post.
Just out of curiosity, do you time block time every day for content?
No, I used to be very specific about my timing, but I guess because I'm consulting now, I don't always have those exact same times available, just because I'm trying to work with clients around the world in their time zones. So, what I really do focus on is trying to produce something of value every single day. That's my goal, and I made this a goal of mine many years ago, that I would do my best to consume one piece of inspirational and positive content at least per day, and that I would try to produce one piece of inspirational and positive content every day. That became my goal, is how can I guard my circle of content that I absorb and make sure that it's positive and uplifting and makes me feel good, and how can I put out content that's positive and uplifting and will hopefully help people. That became a real big goal of mine about 6 or 7 years ago. I just made that a focus every day. And it's made a massive difference, because you can rewire your brain when you expose yourself intentionally to positive things and positive people and positive surroundings and positive inputs and positive language. It has a subtle impact over time on the rewiring of your brain, and it makes you it helps you to see the silver lining in everything over time, because instead of dwelling on the negative, you're dwelling on the positive, and that positively rewires your brain. And that's been a massive benefit to me. Massive.
Yeah, nice. Do you save all those like content you find into a folder, or you save them?
No, I usually just follow positive people. That's what I try to follow. Like at the moment, I'm consuming a lot of Jordan Peterson, because I just think he's amazing at the moment. And at different points in my life, I've consumed a lot of Tony Robbins. I've consumed a lot of Gary Vee. I've consumed and other people, Tom Bilyeu, and other people at different times, at different phases in your life, when you need different types of positivity. Sometimes you need an amp me up positivity. Sometimes it's a mellowing positivity that you need. So it really it's more about the people and the type of content that they're producing on a regular basis. And then I'll follow them and I'll listen to their podcasts and that sort of thing. Nice. Diary of a CEO, I think, is an amazing podcast as well.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Great interviewer, Steve. Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, mate, it's been a cracker catch up. I feel like we covered some really good ground today. And yeah, I'm loving our sessions every couple of weeks. So I'm looking forward to 2 weeks from now.
Me too, mate.
Hey, everybody. So I'm here with Jake Macon once again for our 2 weekly one-to-one mentorship session. And Jake had some really good questions around helping the business to understand profitable versus unprofitable customers, as well as helping the business to understand when they're making strategic decision-making around the profit margins that they're willing to accept as a business. There's always a trade-off. So if you're trying to capture more market share, you might say we can sacrifice some margin to go out and get some more market share, or we might even subsidize that to where we make a small loss, but we're hopefully going to acquire some new customers that then we can hopefully jack up prices in the future and make money off of their repurchasing. I think there's some danger in that approach, only in that oftentimes when you discount to increase market share, you're acquiring price-sensitive customers that the moment that you try to make yourself profitable, sometimes you lose those customers. And then there's also the pollution of data aspect, which we'll talk about in a second. But really, I'm of the firm belief that if you are going to run a successful business, that you should always be profitable. That I think we've seen with Allbirds, and we've seen with so many world famous D2C brands like Casper and so many other like globally famous D2C brands, 8 Sleep and a whole bunch. These D2C brands are not profitable. They have never been profitable, and they have no route to profitability. They've been propped up by investor funds and going public and all sorts of other financial arbitrage that has allowed them to stay afloat whilst not being profitable in the chase of the holy grail of market share. But what they have found is that they have acquired price-sensitive customers, and then when they try to become profitable, they can't, because the price elasticity means that those same price-sensitive customers will now look for another brand that's cheaper to buy instead. And so I am of the personal belief, based on a whole lot of experience in this game, that you should always be profitable. Otherwise, don't be in business. If you can't figure out a way to be profitable on every single sale, then you should, or at least if you are not profitable on a given sale, it should be with very high levels of intention. But then the goal should always be to be profitable on every single sale in the business. But in order to do that, you have to have a really deep understanding of your customers and their behaviors. And unfortunately, what most brands do is they measure like on a CLV basis. When they're trying to calculate CLV for a customer, they're calculating churn, which is usually they look at it as they'll take some arbitrary time period. If a customer hasn't bought with us within 12 months, the last 12 months, then we consider them churned. So what they'll try to do is they'll try to look at the customer lifetime value of all active customers, meaning non-churned customers. And they'll try to say, okay, what's their lifetime spend with us? Or they'll pick an arbitrary period. What was their lifetime spend with us over the last 5 years, right? And then they'll say, okay, now we can look at our high CLV, high customer lifetime value customers to our business, and we're going to make them our high value cohorts, which we're going to try to go find more of. The problem is when you're calculating CSV, there are other metrics that you have to take into account to get an accurate CLV. So you might look at 2 customers, and over a 5-year period, it might look like they've spent the exact same amount of dollars with you, but there's 4 other key metrics that will affect whether those customers were actually profitable for you, to where you can now start to differentiate the profitability of the customer instead of just the revenue of a customer. So for me, when I'm looking at customer lifetime value, I care about the profitability they drove for me, not the revenue they drove for me, right? Yeah. So you have to look at 4 different things. You have to look at the cost of acquisition, ideally at least by channel, and if not by channel, then at least ideally by channel and by customer, but at least by channel. You have to look at cost of acquisition, and you have to assign a cost of acquisition to each customer, because that is the only way that you know how much it cost you to get them in the first place, because that's effectively got to come off the profit that you made off of that purchase. The second thing is cost to service. So some customers will contact you a ton on average per purchase. So if one customer contacts you 3 times on average per purchase, and the other customer contacts you 0.5 times per purchase on average, who's more profitable? Because it costs you money to take a phone call or a live chat or an email or a social media chat. It takes you time to respond to that from customer service, and there's a cost to that. And you ideally need to break down those costs by contact channel, because your customer service team can only take 1 phone call at a time, but they might be able to take 5 live chats at a time. So the cost to service live chat is lower than the cost to service via phone or via email or via social messaging. So you have to understand, and you'll be able to track this, because I know you guys run Gorgeous as your help desk platform, and you track all the customer contacts through those different channels through Gorgeous. Gorgeous has that data. They have the data of number of contacts, and then you can divide that obviously by the number of purchases, and now you have the cost to service that customer on average per purchase. So you need to know those 2 things. You need to know cost of acquisition and the cost of service. What's the next thing we need to know? We need to know the propensity to discount. So if I have 2 customers and they look exactly equal to me from a revenue perspective, and they've both made 10 purchases with me over the last 5 years, but one, right, has bought on a discount 8 out of 10 purchases, whereas the other person has bought on a discount 2 out of 10 purchases, I know which customer is more valuable to me. The customer that buys at a discount less frequently than the one that buys at a discount is more valuable to me, because I made more margin on those orders.
Yep.
The final 4th metric that you have to take into account is return rate, right? So every customer has a different return rate. And again, going back to that same customer that might look the same and has made 10 purchases each over the last 5 years, if 50% of the time customer A has returned items to you, but only 20% of the time customer B has returned items to you, it takes a lot of money to process returns, and obviously it reduces profitability of that order. And particularly if they return the whole thing for a refund or a store credit, then you end up making nothing, and actually ends up costing you something on that first order. So you have to track your returns down to the customer level, so that you can bring these 4 metrics into something like a CDP, so that instead of just looking at revenue for non-churned customers over a window of time, you're taking these 4 components into account, so that you know who your most profitable customers are before you go out and create a cohort out of them and try to go find more customers like them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so much. And I didn't even know about the Gorgeous thing, so that's awesome. But that's definitely a tool that I'm not utilizing to its full potential. So I'm definitely going to spend some time to see what I can get out of that. But yeah, I will have all of that data in separate. I don't have
System.
it, but
Yes.
separate systems. But I think that's definitely where my focus needs to be. I think figuring out exactly who are the most profitable customers first, using all that data, and then
treating them really well, putting them into a VIP tier that then you really go out of your way. Let's say, and if you can segment them in that way, you can usually send those segments to, for example, your OMS, your order management system, or your ERP. So that way, for example, if you've got 50 orders to pack and you've got only 5 VIP orders, pack the VIP orders first to make sure they go out same day or within the hour. You know what I mean? We want to differentiate the service level we give to our VIPs without them necessarily even knowing it. We just want to give them absolutely outstanding service as a reward for being such an awesome customer of ours. And we want to do that at every single touch point. So maybe even from a customer service perspective and prioritization, if you've got VIP tags against that customer in your CRM or your help desk or whatever it might be, if they've got the VIP tag, then you want to treat them like a VIP across every single touch point, not just at the point of sale. And not just at the point of promotion. So I actually think that your most valuable customers, they actually won't generally need much additional prompting or much promotion or much discounting to do business with you. By definition, the ones that expect a discount every time aren't your best customers.
Yeah, this is good. And that sort of leads me on to the next question that I have about the loyalty program sort of situation and how we can incorporate that. At the minute, we're a multi-brand retailer, so our GP it's around 50 to 54, depending on the brand. We can't really offer a bunch of discounts. Our return customer rate is definitely below average. I would say it's around 15% at the minute. We are. My fear is that we're becoming a very transactional
Brand.
business. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose that we're limited to what we can offer in terms of rewards for loyalty. I'd love to try and go down more the experience route, because that's something that we can try and compete on. But I know people in my role previously have tried to pitch loyalty programs to management before, and managements don't like the idea of a loyalty program at all. Something needs to be done. Something like the return customer rate is very low. And again, back to your point on treating your most profitable customers like VIPs. What's your advice on trying to bootstrap a low cost of entry loyalty program that's reasonably easy to actually manage
Yep.
with limited resources, I assume?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of membership over loyalty, right?
Yep.
And the reason I say that is because I have seen loyalty programs fall over in retailers more times than I can count, in terms of it's very difficult to differentiate a loyalty program today. Most brands don't differentiate very well their loyalty program. And so most loyalty programs are of the spend, earn, spend variety. You spend a certain amount, you get a certain amount of points, which translate to a certain amount of dollars, which you can then spend on your next purchase. That's the most common loyalty program out there, and it's boring as shit, and there's no differentiation between your loyalty program and anybody else's that does the same thing, except for maybe the exchange rate of points for dollars, right? That's maybe the only differentiation. So I actually think that quote unquote loyalty programs are actually a crappy way to build loyalty. And I think that most brands would be far better off creating a high value paid or potentially unpaid membership program. And when I'm thinking of membership programs, I'm thinking of an equivalent to Prime, like Amazon Prime, right? You pay for it, but the tangible value is so high that it's an absolute no-brainer if it's offered where you are. There's another brand that does this exceptionally well, and that is Kathmandu with their Summit. It's not really a loyalty program as such, because it's not like you get points and you get discounts, but what you do get is very tangible benefits of being a member of the Summit Club. So when they're doing if you're a member of the Summit Club, when they're running, for example, a promotional period, they will open up the promotional period early to Summit Club members. So you can come in, for example, and in store, you can get the Summit Club promotional price before it opens up to the general public. So that way, for example, for sizes that are rare sizes, for example, that sell out really quick, you'll be able to come in and you actually be able to get it before it goes on broad sale and sells out. They've got lots of other benefits to their Summit Club. That's just one of them, but it's a membership program. It's not they don't call it it's not a loyalty program. It's not a loyalty club. It's a tangible benefit club for being a member. And I think that the brands that do that really well, and again, paid or unpaid, but usually, even if there's just a small payment associated, and it may not even cost all of the money that it costs you to deliver the value, but what it does is it just gives them a little bit of skin in the game, to where they go, maybe it's only $10 a year, or maybe it's $1 a month, $12 a year. Maybe it's only $12 a year. But there's a psychological thing that goes along with paying for something, that you want to get the most value out of it that you can. So let's think of the famous entertainment book that sold in New Zealand and Australia, right? It only cost you $50, $60, but there's $10,000 worth of discounts at hospitality and restaurants in the book. But I tell you, because you spend that $50 or $60 a year to buy the bloody book, you want to use that thing every single time you go out to make sure you get at least $60 worth of value out of that bloody thing that you buy, right? So I think that anything that is a membership type program that has tangible benefits, but that you have to choose to opt into and engage with, by definition, that makes it naturally more sticky. So I think it's easier to differentiate in that environment versus a traditional spend, earn, spend model.
For sure. And I think that's the way that we can compete. Our install service is something that separates us a little bit from the rest. So that's definitely something we could put an emphasis on. And then, a few things cooking in the background as well that would be a good offer to those VIP or to the members.
Yep. And what you might do to kick that program off, you might take a certain segment of your VIPs and say, look, this is a paid program, but because you've been so loyal to us and we want to show our appreciation to you, we're going to give you 12 months or 24 months membership in this program for free. We're going to kick this off. Here's our launch program around our new membership program. But because we appreciate you so much and we want to show our appreciation, we're going to give you free membership in this program for 12 months, 24 months, whatever it is, just as a thank you.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think this is something definitely that we can get over the line a lot easier than trying to,
Than trying to implement a loyalty program where you're just going to hemorrhage margin for no tangible return.
Yeah. And if I can get that profitable customer data, all that sort of stuff sorted, that'll be stage one.
Yep.
But then once I have all that, I'll use that as ammunition for stage two for the membership program.
Yep.
When you like talk it out, it just sounds so obvious. Like paying for it, of course you're gonna want to use it. That's the only reason I order things on Amazon now, because I'm paying for Prime. So anything I want it on Prime. If I can get it on Prime, I'm gonna get it there first because I'm paying for it. So yeah,
100%. Natural human psychology, right?
Yeah.
Awesome,
Thank
man.
you.
Look, no, my pleasure, man. You always come up with the killer questions. You always come up with the super helpful questions. You're right in the thick of it. You're an e-commerce manager. You're facing the same things every single day that I used to face as an e-commerce manager, that I hear e-commerce managers facing every day, that when I get into discovery on re-platforms and all sorts of other projects that I work where the e-commerce manager is often the project lead on say a re-platform project or whatever, I'm hearing the same kinds of things all the time. So you're definitely not alone. You're definitely not alone in your pain. You're definitely not alone in your challenges. And so if I can share a little bit from the trenches about what I see working and what I see not working and why, then I'll feel like hopefully that information is helpful for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, 100%. Appreciate it as always.
Pleasure.
If you'd like to register for free for the Mentor Sessions with Jason Greenwood, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason. See you there.